Migrating from Windows 10 to Windows 11 isn't just a software upgrade. It requires a secure and modern firmware foundation, including UEFI, SecureBoot, and TPM 2.0. And Wes, I'm excited to be here talking with you about the challenges that organizations run into when they try to do this upgrade and how Eclypsium can support a smooth and thorough upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11. So, what kind of challenges are we running into, or do organizations run into when they try to make this switch?
Yeah, so great question. And when we think of just Windows as a whole, Windows 11 is one of the most complicated upgrades that organizations have ever had to face from Microsoft. They have started to move towards requiring a lot of things that are built into hardware capabilities that, in the past we've only really ever had to worry about, does it have enough CPU, does it have enough RAM, does it have enough disk space? Now we have to worry if it does include things like, is SecureBoot turned on? Is my hard disk in GPT format? And do I even have a viable TPM to use across my fleet? These challenges have presented an interesting scenario because in a number of situations, they're not covered by typical inventory management or asset management solutions at scale. And that's really kind of what I wanted to talk through a little bit today is how we can help on that.
Yeah. So backing up a little bit, I think I'm not entirely sure throughout an organization that has to do this whether all the people that would be involved in this upgrade would even know what UEFI is, what Secure Boot is, what a TPM is. Probably the sort of core stakeholders would, but can you give a quick hit on what each of those things is and why they're such an important part of the securing the organization?
Absolutely. And these are really foundational technologies and security controls that are in place. As devices have become more complex, there has been a significant area of opportunity for attackers to move down in the stack, below the operating system, and then bypass operating system controls. So these technologies, like you mentioned there, UEFI, Secure Boot, and TPMs, for example, are built into allowing the device to ensure that it hasn't been compromised and it does contain integrity or is as we would expect it to be from a hardware and firmware perspective. And that's ultimately to modify to make sure the device hasn't, one, been modified, or two, hasn't been had hardware swapped, for example. Something like taking a solid state disk out of one computer and putting into another to try to extract information out of it. And that's really the key, is that as Microsoft has moved between these operating systems, there are foundational changes which rely on these hardware components to build on top of them from a chain of trust, chain of integrity perspective. And that's really helps with making things more secure and building these layers of security.
So the potential consequences of not paying attention to these areas or bungling this is that you have unmonitored, unmanaged attack surface, or you have just operational delays and you don't get the migration all the way done, or what's the downside of not addressing this upgrade properly?
Yeah, and that's the interesting part, is that these are significant challenges that if you don't have these components in your fleet, you're not capable of doing the upgrade. So identifying these early in the process can allow you to better plan what your Windows 11 upgrade will look like. What devices do we have where the device is capable, but maybe not in a configuration that enables that? Or what devices just plain are not capable of sustaining the upgrade to Windows 11 and will have to be physically replaced. Knowing that before you start your project of actually performing the upgrades will help in, unexpected outages and operational difficulties.
Okay, and that's something that Eclypsium can help with, essentially, is figuring out where in the organization you already have the requisite gear or hardware to support it, and then where you don't and are going to need to do a more thorough upgrade that involves actually refreshing hardware instead of just updating the operating system on existing gear.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So where Eclypsium sits is that we act as, in this case, an inventory tool to inventory the hardware and the components and the capabilities of those components at scale throughout an organization. I mean, we bring a lot of other value around vulnerability and security and threat, but in this case, we can be the tool that can give a very quick assessment and discover what devices can be easily upgraded to Windows 11 in place versus ones that will need to have configuration changes done versus ones that will not be able to sustain that upgrade and need to be planned for hardware replacement.
Yeah, that asset inventory is such a foundation. It's like any security project, any sort of IT upgrade project, knowing what you already have at a detailed level is a must. Interesting. So yeah, what other sort of points are worth talking about here? What are the gotchas or the stumbling blocks that organizations are going to run into that Eclypsium can support during this Windows 10 to 11 upgrade? And is there like a timeline on the Windows 10 to 11 upgrade? I mean, this is not a super new need, but obviously it's a hard thing to do, and many organizations have not already made this leap. Is
Mhm.
there a reckoning coming where it's like everyone's got to be fully switched over by this time or things are going to go really poorly? Or is it what's the maturity level of the organizations that are trying to do this now versus are waiting? These kinds of variables.
Yeah, so we're at the stage where if the organization isn't in process of performing the migration, you're already behind. And that's because on October 25th of 2025 is when Microsoft will cease providing updates for Windows 10. So at that point, if you're still on Windows 10, you have a lot of other challenges because you're no longer getting both feature as well as security related updates associated with it. So that's kind of the biggest point is that, that's what, about 6 months from now, where, have to at least be heavily involved in your upgrade processes. So really where that fits on our side is that we will help along with that process if you're already behind on it, on how we can go and help identify where that scope is and how quickly you could perform the migration.
Awesome. Very cool. So Eclypsium helps identify systems that are incompatible, are misconfigured, vulnerable at the firmware level so that you can make informed migration decisions, avoid operational delays, and ensure that every device is both Windows 11 ready and is resilient against firmware threats. Is that fair?
That's absolutely it. I mean, we're all in the game to reduce risk. And in this case, the risk is how do I effectively upgrade to Windows 11? And we want to be one of the tools that provide you more insight, intelligence, and help reduce that operational risk.
Fantastic. Are there any other points we should cover on this topic?
I think I'm good, Chase. I appreciate the time.
Right on. Thanks, Wes.